Republican lawmaker in the Senate issuing a challenge to his colleagues as a new budget showdown approaches. Tea Party Senator Mike Lee out of Utah saying that a vote to fund any part of Obamacare is a vote in favor of Obamacare.
I would invite you to consider the possibility that what you're doing in thinking about funding it isn't really where you want to go. Consider what might be said about this. Defund it or own it. If you fund it, you're for it.
Senator Mike Lee with me now from Capitol Hill. How you doing, Senator? Good morning to you. Make your case. Go ahead. What were you trying to point out there?
What I'm trying to point out is that Americans have long known that this law is going to make health care unaffordable. We also now know the law is going to be unfair because the president is selectively enforcing this against individuals while giving corporations a break. It's not fair. The law's not ready to be implemented, and it's going to make health care more expensive. Those of us who are against this law and recognize these facts need to back up that recognition with a vote that says we'll vote to fund government, but not Obamacare.
I see. So is it tied to the funding of government? And
yes,
if so,
well,
in what sense?
Tied to it in the sense that regardless of what funding bill we look at, we'll vote for something that keeps government functioning as long as there's no Obamacare funding in it. And so my point is that we should not, we need not, we ought not tie Obamacare funding to our ability to fund everything else in government. Those who want to do so want to make sure that Obamacare is funded. But the American people don't want Obamacare. They're not ready for it. And they understand that it's going to make health care more expensive. So I'm encouraging those.
As it stands now, how many votes would you get on that?
Okay, so right now in the House of Representatives, I think there are about 66 or 67 signatures on a letter that identifies with this commitment. In the Senate, we have 13. We had 12 yesterday, but yesterday morning, Mike Crapo, the Republican senator from Idaho, joined us. We're going to continue adding to that list. There are others who I think will eventually be there, but haven't yet signed on. But this is why we're starting early. This is why we started this effort in July, even though the showdown won't occur until the end of September.
So you think that in order to stop Obamacare, this is your last line of defense. If you don't do it this fall, then that battle is over.
Yeah, it's over in the sense that it's going to kick in. Once it kicks in, it's really difficult to stop. Like any new entitlement program, it's not going away. And so if we want to stop it, the time to do it is now. The way we stop it is by funding government, but not Obamacare. And I'm encouraging people to visit don'tfundit.com to express their opinions on this.
Okay, you know you're a long way from getting the votes. I'm sure you're aware of that. Tom Coburn, one of your Republican colleagues out of Oklahoma, he says you might need 67 votes to get what you want. 67 votes is a long way to go. I mean, Democrats control the Senate chamber.
Yeah, look, Tom Coburn is a good friend of mine. I happen to disagree with him on this, and he's mistaken in suggesting it would take 67 votes. It would take 67 votes to override a presidential veto. What I'm saying is we can fund government without any kind of a veto override battle because we can agree to fund everything else in government but just leave Obamacare funding out. That would put the president in a position of having to tell the American people that if he can't get everything he wants, then he's not going to let government get anything. And I don't think that's a tenable position.
Signature piece of legislation from his first term.
Yes,
I mean, how realistic is it?
It would be unrealistic if what we were asking was a full repeal. But I think it is realistic when you've got Republicans in both houses of Congress who unanimously believe that we should not be funding Obamacare, we shouldn't be implementing Obamacare. It's reasonable when every Republican in Congress doesn't want Obamacare. It's reasonable to suggest that we should be willing to vote to fund everything else in government, but that we should not fund Obamacare.
You were joined on the floor with Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. They're in lockstep with you on this. But other Republican colleagues are not, and some of the criticism is harsh. I've heard words like silly, dumb, and dishonest. I think Orrin Hatch called it a feckless proposition. Senator Bob Corker, I think it's a silly effort. What would you say to your colleagues?
I'd say those kinds of statements are not helpful. Those kinds of statements are divisive, but they are nothing compared to what we're going to hear from the American people when they discover that this law goes into effect. And if we vote to fund the implementation of this horrible law, those of us who are Republicans, those of us who claim to be against Obamacare, who happen to vote to fund it, we'll have a lot to pay. We'll have a lot to answer for with our constituents when they discover that we had a part of it.
On that same point, I don't mean to interrupt you here, but there's a story out today that suggests it's already $12 billion more because the employer mandate has now been suspended for another year. So you're looking at a minimum of $12 billion added to the tab of this health care law.
That's right, and that's $12 billion on top of an already escalating bill, an already huge bill that keeps going up. It's already about twice as expensive as we were told it would be at the outset. The president just made it $12 billion more expensive by adding in this sweetheart deal for big business. It's not fair. It's going to make health care unaffordable, and we shouldn't fund it.
All right, Mike Lee, thank you for coming on today and explaining your position. We'll see how you do on the vote tally as we go forward. Mike Lee, Republican from Utah.